ukuthi nje sifuna ini ukuringa yazi masingaringa yazi ukuthi empowethu uwenzani empowethu utopatopa lokho satopa sise-training satopa mfethu leto lena yisho khona ukubeka la idisk lakabakhuntin for sure bacalekazi abo lentwana le yasewestbay uyayikhumbula obopinari yona badubulana kanjani leskit makati idisk mara lento ziphethe inyungu abopini makati uyangithola athi benginathi kasi besidlala sonke nje
imane kumuditse khale ka rejo Sunday re ya dispinning diabo
Phela ke tsere matshekura ke le chapo ke la sitse me bara.
Gore lo nyoko no le wana ke ro mtsanyana.
Jo ene. O bona le no di final ba re ka molota se diantsha.
Okay,
Tsotsitaal and Sepitori, 2 out of South Africa's many non-conventional languages spoken within various communities, most especially within townships. In the past, these have divided opinions and sparked debates amongst linguists over their classifications. Can they be recognized as a language?
It's a language. And the reason why I insist on saying Sepitori is a language is because it has a grammar. You know, that's where the line is. To determine whether this is a language or not, you have to speak about grammar. What is grammar? Grammar touches on syntax, which is word order in a language. Grammar touches on vocabulary that people use, right? If we agree that this is how we're going to use language, and all of us use it that way, grammar settles.
A lingua franca, which is a language used as a means of communication between populations speaking vernaculars that are not mutually intelligible, or simply a slang style, which is unconventional words or phrases that express either something new or something old in a new way. It is flippant, irreverent, indecorous, it may be indecent or obscene. Before we dissect Tsotsitaal and Sepitori, it is important that we take a few steps back into history to take a closer look at another language.
Following the advance of the British in the 19th century, most of South Africa's independent tribes, including the Xhosa and the Zulu, lost this independence to the new colonial form of government. With the advent of the discovery of gold on the Highveld, legislation was passed compelling African people to come to the metropolitan areas to work as miners in order to pay tax.
The migration of Black Africans into mining towns saw the formation of a new language that promoted ease of communication between foremen and workers originating from different tribes and countries. Fanakalo is a pidgin based primarily on Zulu with traces of English and Afrikaans. It was widely used, mainly in gold, diamond, coal, and copper mining industries in South Africa, and to a lesser extent in other African countries such as Malawi, Namibia, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. The name Fanakalo comes from strung together Nguni forms with Fanakalo, meaning like, of, that, and has the meaning of do it like this, reflecting its use as a language of instruction.
Became very much used in the mines around the Witwatersrand because of the huge influx of migrant labour and also, internal and external migrant labour to the region. So that was, and then also in KwaZulu-Natal, a large population of Indian immigrants as well. So that there were two kind of sites where it was used for contact as a contact language. So that people could communicate it was a mutual language because they didn't have languages in common, basically.
Over many decades, the use of the language has dwindled.
I'm going on some research by somebody called Newbie Rose, which was just a few years ago. She argued that it's being used by Indian shopkeepers in KwaZulu-Natal quite a lot to speak to Zulu speaking customers. So it's still quite vibrant in that context, but it was sort of rejected in the mine context because it was seen as a language rather than teaching sort of mine workers, rather than teaching them English. The mines were investing in teaching Fanakalo, and it was seen as sort of restricting their access to English, which was seen as economically a stronger kind of route to go. So I think its use has been reduced in the mine context and been replaced by English in a lot of. Saying that, it was used by some of the unions during the Marikana sort of negotiations and debates. Some of the unions were still using Fanakalo, so I think it's still around.
Marikana, a mining town in the northwest, is one of the areas where Fanakalo is still spoken today.
Lokama kamina Zola, mina phuma lapha Eastern Cape. Losifani kamina mina Mhlangaso. Kujopa lapha mine mina qale kalo 86. Mina fikile lapha mine mina pikinini. Ngicabanga athi mina khona 23 years kade mina pikinini stere. So mina fikile lapha enakhulunywa lo Fanakalo. Lo mlungu lo muntu omnyama zonke emhlobo kade nakhuluma lo Fanakalo. Mina funda yena nabamile ngicabanga mina bambile 1 year.
Makhulu mutinda na khuluma Fanakalo lapha mine. Akumana lapha mine nakhuluma Fanakalo kwenzeka ukuthi nozwanana part of communication. Ndalo munye na mihlobo lo nahlukahlukanile. So kade nakhuluma dinawuzwana kade lapha waiting place underground kade bamba ma safety meeting. Dinawuzwana kade lo munye kwathi nayuza wena lo wena khuluma Xhosa Zulu Venda Changane. So manje renza nzima. So lo mine ukile ukuthi bethe renza one language ukuthi ngiyakhuluma one lwimi Fanakalo dinafunda yena dinajwayela yena lapha job zonke mandawo dinajubisa Fanakalo. Namuhle manje ndaba dinajubisa yena manje so dinajabulela yena dinaenjoy yena namuhle lemi lo dina communicate lula futhi lapha kalo zonke ma mine jubisa Fanakalo.
Mina fundisiwe lokukhuluma lo Fanakalo yena dibanisa zonke lo muntu lena abuya lapha muLusuthu lena abuya lapha eMozambique thina dibana ngalo Fanakalo okwenzela thina bambana ngalo into thina khuluma thina yazi ukuthi lo muntu yena izwana nalapha kalo lamankonzo kathina lapha kalo macawe thina funda lo Fanakalo ukuthi lo muntu yena izwanana yena lo njongo lo kalo Fanakalo yena lokudibanisa lo muntu lona izwanana ukuthi yena izwanana kalo kukhuluma thina khuluma yena futhi thina jabulela yena laba lapha zimine noko wena funa lo yini lapha kalo mlungu wena dibana kalo Fanakalo azikho lo muntu oyakhuluma English azikho lo yena ukhuluma lo language kayena thina dityaniswa kalo Fanakalo.
And a few decades later, in the City of Gold, another language emerged. Tsotsitaal, an amalgamation of mixed languages mainly spoken in the townships of South Africa, is said to owe its origins to language contact within a multilingual setting of 19th century South Africa and to the rise of urban and township communities. The word tsotsi originates from a Sesotho slang word for thug or robber, and dal is the Afrikaans word for language. First known as a criminal language, it had the power of ensuring secrecy in the speech, as only criminals at first could understand it. But by the late 1940s and 1950s, it became popular in iconic townships such as Tsotsitaal, west of Johannesburg.
Around the 1930s, it became noticed and known and sort of an established kind of style in Tsotsitaal. So, and at that stage, it was kind of an Afrikaans-based style that people used, and it sort of used for to seem to appear to be city-wise or city-slick, you know. So it was young guys speaking it amongst themselves very much. It wasn't taught, and it was learned on the streets and learned among friends and among peers and so on.
Is you happy I'm to be seen?
How did you get in?
You left the side door unlocked. That's not my idea, especially these days. Majidas are always on the move.
Why are you here?
Michelle's witness. Excuse Michelle.
For the TV? But you said I can...
For the kitchen staff, baby. And it's over a week now.
You said I could pay you when I got the money. Project, I told you. I don't have it right now. Maybe at the end of this month.
Lester Puppy. I'm running a business, not a charity. I can make exceptions even for the nicest puppies. My loans are strictly 7 days. You pay me.
The way that we've looked at it, it's not a language as such. So I think it's quite important to make that kind of distinction. So, I mean, the way that it's used today, it's very much a style of speaking. And it's a kind of stylization that indicates a particular kind of identity.
Maybe give you story nyala tse di chandi round to iso man.
Hey, bro. Toro fenyano.
Tsoro wena o paisetse wana di drugs.
Ini. Ha ba ngizongihlanyela. Yazini, yabona umuntu lona okhuluma inyonga emitradini. Ngifuna nimthole, nimletheni la. Bese kana mina lo. Ngimsota out one time. Hey. Nani nangidida nani? Enhle ke nifunani yi grandprende. Kanti antshintshisani ukunceda uFifi.
No, ngikhoba khona no dilasa wona. Ngaploma ra usuku wonke.
People will speak their own language, like isiZulu or Sesotho or whatever language they speak, and then they'll draw on the resources from Tsotsitaal to give it a kind of urban identity or an urban spin.
Dr. Hurst Harash classifies Tsotsitaal as a stylect, a stylized lexicon that involves other aspects such as body language and gestures that indicate urban identity as distinctly seen in the performances by actors on Generations The Legacy and Isitengo. As time progressed, Tsotsitaal was viewed as an elite sign of rebellion against the state and its police, and as gangsters were admired by youths who would see them as an example of success, Tsotsitaal became a youth and street language. Tsotsitaal, although defined as a variety of mixed languages spoken in townships, differs from some languages spoken within townships today. Let us break this down by using isiZulu as an example. isiZulu is one of South Africa's 12 official languages. The pure version of this language will most likely be spoken by those who reside or hail from KwaZulu-Natal. Younger people whose past generation family members migrated to, say, Soweto from KwaZulu-Natal and have lived in the townships for decades are now likely to speak an urban variety of isiZulu, also known as Jozi Zulu.
My family has been this side for like years and years, probably before Mandela himself, you know. My granny's mother is the one that grew up with Mandela this side, you know, so we stay 2 houses away from Sakumzi. And yeah, we've been this side for a while. I'm Zulu. Then a part of my family is also Sotho. So ekhaya, we speak Zulu. But I speak Zulu with my granny. When I speak with my mother, we speak Sesotho, you know? But when I'm outside, that's when I'm with the boys, the streets, we speak what people normally know as slang, which is basically Tsotsitaal. So siyarenga.
Ukurenga is what Dr. Hurst Harash refers to as an urban variety, a trendier urban language spoken by the youth. This is also known as Scamto, Kasilingo, Ringas, or Istsotsi. Like Busiso, most speakers agree that this lingo is reserved for friends or peers.
The language I speak at home kahle kahle ngikhuluma isiZulu ke vele ngoba singamaZulu ekhaya. So vele ekukhuleni vele nasesikolweni yabona I chose vele isiZulu, it was our home language. Then ke mangisekasi ke namajita sikhuluma vele Tsotsitaal saringa.
Eyasekhaya nesestradini different because obviously ekhaya ngeke ukhulume nabantu abadala ngendlela ukukhuluma ngayo vele nabangani bakho. So ekhaya obviously ngiyahlonipha vele ngikhuluma kahle bangizwe vele abantu abadala njengoba vele bangifundisa ukukhuluma ngakhona indlela yokukhuluma. Bese mase ngisestradini ke yayo yasashoshova namajita vele sekuyilanguage different njengamagama ukuthini ngiyakudalela mhlambe momngana mangikudalela ngiyakenzela mhlambe futhi khona futhi lidumile kuthiwa uyawompa ukwompa like uzulazula uzazi ukuthi uyapi yabona. So izinto enjalo nje kodwa nje iTsotsitaal nje hayi ikakhulu istradini.
Yes, usambianya ngikhiphe ehlathini ngoba sekusesikhathini ngithumele emkhathini nibaluleke emphakathini njengoba bumahlathini.
The Kwaito movement in the late 90s and 2000s gained popularity through its use of this language, which appealed to the young South Africans at the time.
When you write lyrics, there's most of like township slang, everyday life. When you find that the song in the songs, the language it's lingo. It's not like a formal language, you know.
Township lingo or instalment is common, easy to understand, and most importantly, created in South Africa. It's the perfect language to go with locally produced beats.
Although it has similarities, the lingo is not necessarily Tsotsitaal, but rather an urban spin of the language.
Ungaba coach hotel. Uyafona. Khona intwana ezincane masibeske. Uyazibamba coach. Sifuna ini? Jathi nje into encane amakhulu.
Yeah, because more like assistant. Yeah, a technical team. I could be part of the technical team.
Kube parent team. Parent team ukuthi emfethu man yazileni. Ihamba iyofasi. Isipha esikoleni.
Yabona mangibheke technical team leading siya. Yeah, but you know something.
The next language we look at takes us to the north of Gauteng and back into the 1850s.
I'm from Rustenburg originally. That's where I was born and raised. So when I was 5 years old, my mom visited her aunt in Zone 6, Harangua. When we arrived there, I easily picked up that my peers spoke what I thought was Setswana, but it wasn't. It sounded different. Some of the words I didn't understand, and I kept asking my mom, "What language is this?" And my mom said, "It's Setswana." I said, "It's a different Setswana, right?" She said, "Yes." I mean, as a 5-year-old, I didn't have any inclination of variations in a language. Because I mean, for 5 years, I had lived in this bubble called Rustenburg. So that's where the interest, I believe, started. So throughout my life, I was paying attention to this Sepitori language, and as they say, the rest is history.
This language that captivated and intrigued the then 5-year-old Thabo Ditsele, who later became a sociolinguist professor, was Sepitori. Sepitori is a language spoken by residents of Pretoria, or Pitori as it's called by natives. The language is an informal language and a result of mixing mainly Sepedi and Setswana, and has influences from Tsotsitaal, Afrikaans, Sesotho, and other Bantu languages of the region, making the lingo even more complex and charismatic.
This is water from different provinces. Language communicate. So Pitori is a buy. Changani Zulu, the water Marnal Arto Chakansa, combination at Taylor is a one. So go on and take away long good. So
Don't jangano Zulu wale okonunguta nseko wala so. Understand? You know combination of references or kuida language variki Sepitori.
Many people think that Sepitori came now with the new generation, the born frees. No, it dates back to the 1850s. That is when the Dutch, whose descendants are now called Afrikaners, arrived in this area in 1855. So they were looking for labor, people who could help them, build the city of Pretoria. So the people of Hammanskraal, who speak a Setswana dialect called Sekhatla, were the ones who were readily available. At the time, there were no other towns north of Pretoria. So people from northern, what you call Limpopo today, people from Mpumalanga started moving south to where Pretoria is now. They came with a language called Sepedi, or some people call it Northern Sotho, or dialects of Northern Sotho. So what tended to happen is when they interacted with Setswana speakers who spoke Sekhatla dialect, because the two languages are mutually intelligible, that is Setswana and Sepedi, Sepitori started settling, right? There was an exchange of verbs and nouns, and over time it settled into a variety that it is today.
Sepitori, in all its intent and purposes, according to Professor Ditsele, is a non-standard Sesotho language. Like Tsotsitaal, Sepitori has an urban vernacular spoken by the youth that draws inspiration from Sepitori, but is not Sepitori.
Oh, so banyaka vele re no kra tikete dilo di bestele.
Ke jacket di teng di tlhapetse. Le mola mo tlase mola jo.
Ah mara jo.
Mo ka strata sela sa.
Ah mara re foutele ya lofta se re bona game sharp stele one tshwana. Oh jo. Oh biosa. Oh tebe re tsere wa itse ya para nna mo di VIP tla se tsela dia bona.
Every township in South Africa would have a youth language. So Tswana is not different. So what tends to happen is the youth of Tswana who at home speak Sepitori tend to, use vibey, trendy language. Now, because it hasn't been given a name yet, it is then assumed that that is actually Sepitori. I can give an example with Soweto. In Soweto, for instance, there are two main varieties spoken there. You have what we call Jozi Zulu, and we have what we call Jozi Sotho, right? Those are languages. If you speak to someone from Dube in Soweto, they wouldn't sound like someone from Nongoma, right? So they speak a variety that is spoken in Soweto, or in Thokoza, in Katlehong. Sepitori is the same. People speak this variety at home. Pastors, if you go to church, they preach in it. It's just that the youth, then, wanting to be trendy, they start to introduce expressions, words, and then people just call them Sepitori.
Professor Ditsele asserts that there is a distinctive difference between Sepitori spoken by the general masses and that spoken by the youth that Pretoria natives can decipher. The former, he believes, should be considered a language.
From a conservative perspective, people dismiss it as not being a language. And the reason for that is because they are scared of change. They don't want to see change. They see Sepitori as a language that threatens standard varieties. But it is a language, to answer your question, because it has a grammar. And I've challenged many people to say, would you dispute that this is Sepitori's grammar? And I will give you a sentence to say, analyze this sentence. Well, what normally people would say is that, but this word, its etymology, its origin is Northern Sotho. This one's origin is Afrikaans. Well, English is the same. There are words that have not always been English. They're adopted from other languages. They've settled into English. So you can't disqualify English just because you have Japanese words like karate, karaoke. You have words like hamburger from German. You run dismisses on those bases.
In 2014, Professor Ditsele wrote a journal article studying and asking a question likely to be directed at language purists. Why not use Sepitori to enrich the vocabularies of Setswana and Sepedi?
Terminologies are coined in the Pretoria area, and these are words that do not exist in Setswana and in Sepedi, to some extent even Sesotho. And I use an example of a word like spatru. In Johannesburg, they call it kota, right? Because it's a quarter of a loaf. Here they call it spatru. Now in Setswana, they don't have there's no such a term. In Sepedi, there's no such a term. But here is a term that people of Pretoria have coined to say this type of bread where you fill with chips and acha, this is the term for it, right? So there's nothing wrong in enriching the terminology list of Setswana and Sepedi by saying, if we have to talk about this piece of bread, we're going to use spatru. All that you need to do is to focus on the orthography. For instance, the orthography of Sotho languages doesn't allow for consonants S and P, right, to be used without a vowel in between. So how do you manage that morphologically? You just insert vowel E to make it sepatru so that it conforms to the orthography of the two languages. By so doing, you shall have enriched. Now these two standard languages have gained a term that the people of Tswana have used, right? I also make an argument that even when it comes to verbs that have settled into Sepitori but not used in one or the other. I use an example of the word like lukisa, right? Lukisa in Sepedi means to fix or to rectify. It's a commonly used verb in the Tswana area. But in Setswana, the term that is used for to fix is baakanya. Now, effectively, what it means is that a child who goes to grade 1 in Harankuwa or in Temba, who is studying Setswana, they know the term to be holukisa. But now they are told, this is not what we use. We only use baakanya. If you've written lukisa, it's marked wrong. So my argument is, what is the harm in making the two synonymous, right? So you can use lukisa for baakanya. Even in Sepedi. In Sepedi, they talk about hotseba, which is to know, right? In Sepitori, people use huitsi, which is a verb in Setswana to mean to know. So there shouldn't be any harm if you allow a child, a learner in Mamelodi to also write hakebatlu huitsi as opposed to hakebatlu tseba. So tseba and itsi should be allowed to be synonymous. If you do that, there are enormous benefits. A standard language like Sepedi has gained a new verb. A language like Setswana has gained a new verb. That's how it will grow. If you want to kill any language, stop it from gaining new terminologies.
I want you to take back the stuff.
Jama's witness. No credits, no returns. Open Patal, that is my motto.
I told you I don't have the money.
Dan Kreon Salaman Irfan Patal. Maskin convince Jamie to the deadline to so big shift. If you're real good, I might even drop the price.
What does the future look like for these languages in as far as the evolution of African languages is concerned?
I find that for him to get arrested. Sniff around. No. Ne, bossa. Guidance is not good, yes. What if umuntu nje ozopepereza?
Umuntu ofeng. Bona, akona motho itseng gore nna le wena ke re-involved.
Oh, mara ifreke again. I
think if you take the word isitsotsi or tsotsitaal off the table and you talk about recognizing the urban vernaculars as sort of legitimate languages, I think that's the way that I would put it now, to recognize that people are growing up in township contexts where they're not speaking sort of pure or rural forms of isiZulu or Sesotho. They're speaking the urban vernaculars, and they're dominant in the environment, and they're spoken by everybody. So I think there needs to be some work done around looking at the urban vernaculars and and recognizing what it is that people are speaking today in terms of African languages, and recognizing a negatively impact on somebody if they go into a school environment and their language isn't recognized, the language that they've grown up speaking. I think my views have shifted definitely around the languages that we're talking about, the phenomena that we're talking about, and the difference between Tsotsitaal and the urban vernaculars. But in general, I think there does need to be some work done around the national languages and what that means in terms of how people are speaking today, particularly in the urban centres.
Tsotsitaal language ekhulunywa kushuthi intsha kahle kahle. It's not abantu abadala, because abantu abadala singasho ukuthi isikhathi mhlambe sabo nesamanje asifani yabona, so ingakho vele ikhuluma vele mostly it's youth.
Growing up vele sibancane vele, so ukukhula nje phuma ngaphandle estradini yo meet up with friends, always talk vele Tsotsitaal, from vele primary to high school to tertiary yabona, siloke vele siyaringa namajita, we communicate with Tsotsitaal even better ngoba sakwazi ukunderstandana lapho. Omunye umuntu uphuma ekhaya ukhuluma isiSuthu, omunye uphuma umXhosa, but mase sihlangene sonke sisikhuluma Tsotsitaal, we communicate better.
Tsotsitaal, you get it from the hood, outside. Ekhaya, inside home, they are very strict. Like, parents are strict. You only get to speak the Sotho or the Zulu, whatever the culture is. So Tsotsitaal is more of our secret language. If I want to say something that my granny cannot hear fast, I use the Tsotsitaal.
At some point, we're going to be faced with two options. Do we allow African languages to die, or do we allow them to be trendy so that they make sense to future generations? Because if you are too prescriptive, that's when you're going to start to have people rejecting. There's a very good scholar from University of Pretoria, Professor Vic Webb. He always talks about how we speakers of African languages expect change to come from the top, top-down approach. He's always argued, using Afrikaans as an example, to say when Afrikaans started in the 1870s, as a Kombe's style or kitchen language, kitchen Dutch, it's common people who developed it from the bottom to say, this is our language, it's fine to read a Dutch Bible in church, but ordinarily as we communicate, we speak Kombe's style. So it's people on the ground who started developing the language until in 1925, it gained official status. So all record of history shows that if change happens from the bottom, that becomes effective, not change from the top. Because, and I'm linking this with what you parents usually say. No, we can't teach our languages in school because where is terminology? They don't understand that you have to start to use so that you identify where the gaps in terminologies are. So once you see those gaps, you are going to say, Sepitori has this term. Let's rather use it. That's how you grow. That's how Afrikaans, when it started in 1914, when it was first used as a school language in grade 1, it didn't have a lot of terminologies. But as time went by, with commitment from people, grabbing terms wherever they could get them, right? It developed. Today is the only other language other than English in South Africa where you can study from crèche or kindergarten, as Americans say, to PhD. Other languages are not capable. We haven't developed. And we think boardrooms must develop terminologies first so that you can do a PhD in engineering in Zulu. No, that's not how it starts. It has to start with teaching IT in primary school in isiZulu to see where the gaps are. You go develop, and then 20 years later, there's enough IT terminology in Zulu that someone can pursue a master's degree in chemical engineering in isiZulu. It's not the other way around, and it's not really complicated.
South Africa is a diverse country that boasts a rich cultural history, It therefore comes as no surprise that unconventional languages would originate organically and continue to exist decades later. Judging by how people communicate today, they are here to stay. And who knows, maybe one day these unconventional ways of speaking may gain enough credibility to enrich our standardized conventional methods of communicating through language.